What's going on YouTube? Cloverbills here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be talking about Hatterene and the state of the hard trick room cores. So Hatterene is something that is starting to rise a little bit in recent weeks, and it also made quite the appearance in the Orlando regionals. Now that being said, you didn't see it in Top Cut, but you saw it right on the outskirts of it, and we'll take a look at some teams that were using Hatterene on those trick room teams. Because it wasn't just one or two teams, it was actually quite a few. We'll also look at how Hatterene has been able to find some usage in Series 2, whereas in Series 1 it really wasn't seen all that much or even used that much, and for good reason. All right, because the meta didn't really allow for it. But now with a different kind of meta in Series 2 with Paradox Pokemon, now all of a sudden there is a use for Hatterene. So we'll take a look at its moveset, some of its stats, and potential items it can have. And then we'll look at some tournament teams just to see how some of these squads have been using Hatterene and where I think it could go forward, leading up to the next region. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so what we need to do first is do a little backstory on Hatterene, right? So Hatterene was a pretty dominant trick room sweeper in, Sword and Shield in some of the earlier series, right? It was able to, basically Dynamax go for big damage, and under trick room, you were just able to, do a lot of damage, basically, right? And people thought that was going to be the case again in Scarlet and Violet, especially with terrestrialization, because you got to, Terra option, go for expanding force and hit super effective, super hard damage. And, you paired it with in DDF with the Psychic Surge, you got the terrain boost, and now people thought, oh, Life Orb Hatterene with expanding force is just going to rip through things, especially if it was Terra Psychic. The problem was, take a look, Hatterene lost expanding force. So, come Scarlet and Violet, and especially in Series 1, people are like, well, now what do I do? Right? Because now people were expecting to just rip through with that move, but now because it doesn't get it, now people started to think, oh, now what do I do? So, this is where it kind of fell out of favor, and people started to just use something like an Armarouge, because Armarouge, like Hatterene, has a very good special attack stat, has pretty good bulk. In fact, you can argue that has just a little bit better bulk, but now it also got expanding force, and yes, it does have about 11 less special attack stat, and it has a little bit less special defense, but at least it has a better HP stat and a better defense stat a little bit, and it still got expanding force. So now people started opting for the Armarouge instead of the Hatterene, right? It was just a little bit better. So sorry for Hatterene. But then you realize that Series 2 is now here, and it's a little bit different than Series 1. So if you look at the meta and the Pokemon that are relevant in Series 2, they're very different from Series 1. And this is where Hatterene started to rise a little bit, because it does a lot better against the Paradox Pokemon and other things that are super meta in Series 2 as opposed to Series 1, all right? And people realized this going into Orlando, which is why they brought it, and a lot of them almost top cut that tournament, right? So what we're gonna do now is take a look at some of Hatterene's movesets here that people were considering and even used in Orlando. But basically the way it works is you had your Trick Room set up here on the Hatterene, and with Life Orb you're able to do a lot of damage with something like Dazzling Gleam, okay? It's a stab move, it's a spread move, does big damage with your Life Orb, of course. Then you had, instead of expanding force, you just opted for a single target psychic move, which in retrospect is not so bad, because a lot of things are running wide guard now, so you don't want to get walled at with Dazzling Gleam and expanding force. So people just said, okay, psychic is actually very passable now. And then Mystical Fire, right? So with Terra Fire, Mystical Fire, what you're able to do is now snipe those steel type Pokemon that are super effective against you, right? So something like a King Gambit, something like Goldango, you can just Terra Fire and just go for big Mystical Fire damage, and it's going to do a bunch, and it's going to even pick up those KOs, right? This is a pretty good Hatterene set in Series 2. It's very standard, very meta, and if you look at its ability, Magic Bounce, also very nice, because you're able to bounce back those status moves that people want to click, something like a Spore or a Will-O-Wisp into your physical attacker. You just pivot in your Hatterene and it just gets sent right back to them if they're able to take it, depending on their type, right? The other thing is this speed stat of 29 is important, because in Trick Room, right, with 0 speed IVs, guess who you underspeed? This thing, the Amoonguss, right? So Amoonguss has a base speed of 30, right? But in Trick Room, Hatterene 29 will outspeed the Amoonguss, and that's important, because now you can just go for hard-hitting Psychics or Terra Fire, Mystical Fires, and just snipe this thing off the board, and it's dead. And that's important, because now something like an Iron Hands on your team doesn't have to worry about an Amoonguss anymore because you have the Hatterene that's able to just snipe it right off the board, right? So that's important. And it has some other Pokemon that it does really well against, and we're going to cover that in another time step in the video. But for now, what I want to do is take a look at some of these meta teams from Orlando and see what they were using Hatterene for. And also note that in some of the online tours leading into Orlando, they were already starting to use Hatterene, right? And that's why I put it in that video where I put Hatterene as a sleeper, one of my sleepers, because I thought it could do really well because it does a lot against some of the other Series 2 stuff. So what we're going to do now is we'll take a look at some of those Orlando teams, all right, and see what people were trying to run with it. All right, so now we're in the VGC pace repository, and now what we're going to look at is those Hatterene teams. So none of them are in the top cut, at least not to my understanding. But if you look down here, we're, within 128th, again, still getting some CP. Let's take a look here at some of these Hatterene teams. So first of all, the one I want to look at first is this guy from our guy Luke, aka Jin. Okay, and shout outs to Jin, man. But 8-2 is actually a fantastic performance, and I don't think Jin is gonna watch this video at all. But he's someone that I've watched for a very long time, especially when I was first getting into VGC. Very entertaining Twitch streamer, so I'm super glad to see him do well there. And Jin, if you're ever gonna watch this, but I do want to say that it's an absolute travesty that you could go 8-2 in a regional and not top cut, man. Look at all these 8-2s. You tell me they're not the same as these 8-2s, man. Thankfully, I think they're addressing that and they changed the rules, right? But that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, what did Luke do? What did Jin do? I should say. Yeah, like this is as expected. This is very standard. This is actually the 6 I would consider running if I were to build a Hatterene team like this. I would probably do a couple of things different with some of these movesets. But, in essence, you can actually leave it as it is. And then, this is actually very, very fine and very, very standard, right? But, of course, Indeedee Hatterene, along with the Armarouge, so they do different things. And you might think, like, they're both special attackers in Trick Room. Like, why would you want both of them on the same team? Wouldn't you want something else and add flexibility? You need them for very specific matchups, all right? And you need them to do specific things because, depending on the coverage move that they have, especially this guy who has more fire coverage and even, like, a stronger psychic move, they're going to do some stuff that's, that Hatterene can't do. And Hatterene, on the flip side, can also do something that the Armarouge can't do. So it really depends on the matchups that you want to bring them. But, Torkoal is here. Torkoal is going to boost both of their damage, right, depending on the fire move that they click. And it's a Trick Room Sweeper. You just get in the Eruption. You could even do, like, Annihilate stuff where you have a Trick Room setter over here. Just take out one slot with the final Gambit, get Trick Room up, and then you get a free switch into either your Torkoal or maybe even your Hatterene or one of these guys. Click the Eruption button, the game is over, right? It's that simple, right? With a team like this, and it's very cool. Iron Hands, this is your physical Trick Room Sweeper. Makes a lot of sense, of course. And I see the Brick. I love that tech, probably to the break screens, especially the Grimmsnarl stuff. So really cool team from Jin. Congrats again. 8-2 is fantastic, right? What about the other Hatterene teams? All right, so let's keep going down the list here and see some other Hatterene squads, okay? Because it was there, okay? You just didn't see it in Top Cut, but it was there. 7-3, 8-2s are still very, very good records. All right, so let's keep going down here. Here's another one, right? Aaron Trailer, right? Aaron Zhang and Wolf Glick's good buddy. Aaron Trailer brought Hatterene, okay? Again, you see the similar core with Indeedee, Armarouge, Iron Hands, and Torkoal, okay? Now, the only difference here is that there is a Brute Bonnet, which also makes sense, right? It's another good Trick Room physical sweeper. Bullet Seed, Loaded Dice is a great tech move here. And then, of course, Rage Powder, set up, and, a Dark Stab move. So, again, similar to what Jin was doing, just a Brute Bonnet instead of a Annihilate. Again, very, very nice. Trick Room here, 1000 Gleam Psychic. Of course, Covert Cloak is really good. The Garganical nonsense, and of course, other resistances. And then Safety Goggles, Terra Dark. So this way the Amoonguss can't sleep you. And Terra Dark helps you against like other specific weaknesses that Armarouge would have, right? But the core is still the same. So shout outs to Iron Trailer. Again, great job. 7-3 is really good. If I keep going down, I should find more Hatterene teams that are also 7-3. Okay, and you'll see that they often have a similar core, right? So another one right here, Kelvin Kuhn, 7-3. Actually, it's a little bit different than some of the others, right? All right, you still have the Iron Hands here, and you still have the Armarouge. No Indeedee, though. Okay, so that's important, and there is an Amoonguss instead. That's okay, rather than the Brute Bonnet. That's fine, but then you have, like, Gastrodon and Azumarill. So, actually, it's a very cool team, very interesting team. But again, another Hatterene team. This one has Life Orb actually, so that's also cool. Terra Steel is actually very, very interesting. I would not have guessed something like this would have Terra Steel, so that's cool. Then if I keep going down the list here, finding more Hatterene teams, which we can find very easily. Here's another one, right? Another 7-3, Matthew Bob. Okay, check his team out. Yeah, it's a similar core. Like here's the Indeedee Armarouge core. There's the Iron Hands. There's the Annihilate, right? Final Gambit. And here's a King Gambit, okay? Rather than Brute Bonnet, you know, and even with Jim's team, you have a King Gambit here. So it makes a lot of sense. You know, you don't want your Iron Hands to get intimidated. And same thing, you know, even your Annihilate does really well into the Arcanine stuff. That's the thing. Like, if I were to look at this kind of 6, like, look how well the Arcanine does here. You can just snarl this, snarl this, snarl this, snarl this. Like, you don't have any Wide Guard here. You're almost forced to click Wide Guard, and then, you know, the Indeedee, Torkoal, Hatterene still kind of suffers, and then the Iron Hands kind of suffers too because of the Intimidate. But the Annihilate, you know, Defiant will actually do something for the Arcanine in that regard, right? So you just have to be careful. You have to have an answer with Arcanine because this 5 kind of is a little bit tricky in that kind of match, right? Same thing over here, but you know, I digress. Okay, so cool thing with Michael over here. I mean Matthew, makes a lot of sense. Again, similar core. If I keep going down the list here, I should find more. Right here, Jake Magyar, another 7-3, very, very good performance, and it's pretty much the same kind of thing, right? So Indeedee, Armarouge with Hatterene, and again Iron Hands, Torkoal, and then Brute Bonnet. Very, very standard core. So if you ever want to build like a hard Trick Room team, this is it. Just follow this kind of template. Even Jin's is pretty good. Aaron Trailer, same thing. You know, it's more or less the same idea, right? If I keep going down, I should find like maybe a couple more because I'm getting close to 128. Here's another one, right? Patrick Donegan. Okay, what do we got here, Patrick? Yeah, I mean, as expected, it's the same core. I'm not even going to mention anything because we've seen this already. So good job, Patrick. If I go down, can I find a little more? Here's another one. Okay, Anna Hoffman. Cool. All right, what did Anna run? Okay, so we got Brute Bonnet. Okay, we got Hatterene and Torkoal. Okay, that much is still pretty much the same. But there's also an Amoonguss. Holy cow! Wait a minute, Brute Bonnet and Amoonguss. Okay, so this is like half hard Trick Room, right? There's Dragon Dance on Roaring Moon, which I have seen on some of the other Hatterene teams in some of the online tournaments, and I like that a lot. I like that there's flexibility and not just hard Trick Room. So this makes sense. And Dragon Dance, of course, with redirection is really, really good. So really, really nice squad here from Anahoff, and it's Life Orb Fluttering. Oh my goodness! All right, that's pretty cool. If I keep going down here, I think I find one more. Oh nope, that was the last one. All right, so you see the similar core, right? Especially, you know, with all these Hatterene hard Trick Room teams. It's basically, you know, a redirection bond with Indeedee. You have the Armarouge, then you have 2 physical options. You either have the Iron Hands Annihilate or Iron Hands and Brute Bonnet, and then some filler slot, right? And then of course Torkoal, technically. And if you don't like Torkoal, great. You don't have to have Torkoal. You can just go for something like a King Gambit and just go on the physical side, right? Because with Hatterene and Armarouge, your special attack coverage is good. Okay, so you need a little bit more physical force. And then again, Torkoal is kind of tricky, right? Because you're giving the photosynthesis boost to their Pokemon as well. So sometimes that's not so great. But in Trick Room mode, hard Trick Room with clicking Eruption, that, you know, it doesn't really matter because they die after Eruption. But now you get a sense of what these tournament teams are doing. So now what you can do is start building your own template, and we'll give you one. Okay, I'll show you like a soft Trick Room core and a hard Trick Room core, basically how I would do it. But I want to take now the moment to show you other Pokemon that Hatterene can do well against, because this is why they brought it in these tournament teams. So let's take a look. Okay, so I have a list of some of the Series 2 meta Pokemon that Hatterene can do really well with. So first off, let's start with the Paradox Mons with like Roaring Moon, Iron Hand, and Great Tusk. Like these two especially, right? Roaring Moon and Iron Hands, both very weak to Fairy, and both also on 40% of teams. Okay, so that's important. Well, especially this guy. This one is a little bit less, but still within like the top 10, of course. Top 5, if anything. So like you're able to go for Dazzling Gleam on both of these. They just drop, okay? They don't have the greatest special defense, especially on the Iron Hands. And Roaring Moon, even though it has pretty good special defense, it's 4 times weak to Fairy. So that's not an option either. So it does really well against these two. Great Tusk also starting to rise because of the Iron Hands. Great Tusk, again, that fighting typing makes it susceptible to Fairy damage. And even if it has an Assault Vest, if the Hatterene is Life Orb and it's Dazzling Gleam, it's going to do so much. It might even just pick up the KO depending on their EV spread. I have to check that. I haven't really checked it. But again, it's dominant damage. Brute Bonnet, this is why Amoonguss is a little bit better in this case. But Brute Bonnet, you know, because it is dark typing, you're susceptible to fairy damage, right? So, you know, and I know it's very bulky, but at the same time, you know, it's also not, because Life Orb, Dazzling Gleam just does so much, especially if it is Terra Fairy, but usually they're not. They like to go defensive with the Terra Fire, Mystical Fire option, right? So there's that. But again, it's also weak to that, right? So if Torkoal comes out, then it can just go for Mystical Fire, and Torkoal can just go for something else. Amoonguss, same thing, right? You're not weak to fairy damage, but you are weak to psychic damage because it is poison typing, right? So that's the thing. You know, you could just snipe the Amoonguss as you outspeed it in Trick Room anyway. And the Garganical, same idea, right? Especially if they're still running the poison Terra type, which some of them are. Some of them are switching to Ghost now, but you know, the poison type is also still there. And again, this also just drops to psychic damage, right? This is why Armarouge was really good on teams like this, because you know, you're just able to go for Expanding Force. But Hatterene also has that, you know, single target psychic move, and it has more damage than Armarouge in that regard. So the Garganical also drops if it does go for Terra Poison, right? So look at all these mons. It does really well against all these. These are all like top 10, top 15 meta Pokemon. So Hatterene actually has a good niche. Okay, so this is why, you know, if you do want to run Trick Room Core, definitely consider Hatterene. It makes a lot of sense here, at least right now in the current meta. Okay, so now let's go into some soft team building where I can show you some general ideas on how to use Hatterene, right? And if anything, take a look at those tournament teams. I think those are the ideal ones. You just have to create EV spreads. So we're just going to do a little bit of soft team building. So let's see what they look like. Okay, so let's start with the hard Trick Room Core. So again, back to like the earlier part of the video, we showed you Indeedee Hatterene. Of course, you need a Redirector, you need Trick Room Center. But again, Indeedee will also get Trick Room. But again, we'll do those movesets after we round out the 6. I think Torkoal has a little bit of merit, even if, you know, it's not as strong as it should be, you know, because of Paradox. But again, with Torkoal, you know, just having Eruption pressure under Trick Room is actually very, very strong. You also have the Annihilate, of course, you know, just to be able to go for that Choice Scarf, Final Gambit stuff. And again, Define, you know, just to help you a little bit more against the Arcanine stuff. Then again, you're just going for Final Gambit to that slot. Either way. So, of course, we'll put it there. Then here, you have the Iron Hands, but I want to do something different with the Iron Hands with the moveset. You'll see it in a second. And then the last slot here, of course, you do have the Armarouge, and I'll just move that over here technically. Okay, so this is pretty much a hard Trick Room core that's just meant to, like, you know, set up Trick Room, you know, take out some big threat to it, and then just go into your Trick Room Sweeper because you get a free switch, and then just go from there, right? So in terms of rounding out the team, of course, the Indeedee is going to have like Follow Me. It's going to have Dazzling Gleam with the Terra Fairy option. So this is really good against like opposing dark types like a Roaring Moon. Not that I would even bring Roaring Moon to this matchup because it's going to have a little bit of a harder time, but they might be tempted because there's an Annihilate on the team, right? But maybe even then, it's still not worth it. Then you have Helping Hand, and then you have Trick Room, right? This is pretty standard Indeedee moveset. And then, of course, the Psychic Seeds, just for that extra physical defense, right? Special defense, I should say. And then we're just going to go like some relaxed nature over here with max HP to deal that, right? But we won't be doing EV spreads and this type of thing. I'm just showing you like the build for it. With Torkoal, you can go Charcoal here, you know, just for a little bit more damage with Eruption. Flamethrower, single target damage is nice. And then Clear Smog for Dondozo stuff, and then Protect, okay? Very standard Torkoal set. Armarouge, you know, just with this thing, Expanding Force, of course, Armor Cannon, you know, really good fire damage, especially helped out from Torkoal. Energy Ball, good grass coverage, and then Protect here in this last slot, right? You can go for Wide Guard here if you really want to. I leave it up to you, but I like Protect in this slot. Okay, so I will stay with Protect. But if you like Wide Guard, go for it. And then here you can also use something called Twisted Spoon. I've seen this a little bit on the online tours, and even in Orlando, you saw it. Does a little bit more damage with your Expanding Force, which I think is good. So definitely consider that as an item. You can even do like Safety Goggles over here, Terra Dark. That's also an option. But I like Twisted Spoon just for a little bit more damage. But feel free to use either of the other two options, right? Final Gambit, of course, Close Combat, Shadow Claw, and then U-Turn. Very standard Choice Scarf set. You know, you're clicking Final Gambit most times, but in the event that you don't, you could always switch it out and come back, you know, with potential U-Turn, get some chip damage first. All right. Then the Iron Hands here. So with the Iron Hands, what I want to do is this. I'm not going to give it the Assault Vest set. I'm going to go for Citrus Berry, Wild Charge, Drain Punch, Swords Dance, and Protect, right? You can even go for Belly Drum here, technically, right? So I'll even go for Belly Drum here. Oops, sorry. That's so keep the Citrus Berry. You can even go for Belly Drum. Just maximize your attack, and then once Trick Room is out, start sweeping, okay? And you know, you do lose some health because you're going for Belly Drum, but you gain it back with Citrus Berry, and then you just go for Drain Punch and recover the rest of it, okay? And it's just going to do so much damage if you have it like this. And I think it's a pretty cool way to run Iron Hands. But if you don't want the HP reduction, you can just play it safer and just go for Swords Dance, right? The only thing is, like, you know, Arcanite's coming around, and, you know, plus max Swords Dance from Belly Drum is better. I'm sorry. Max attack from Belly Drum is a little bit better than just +1 from Swords Dance if the Arcanite does come out, right? But I leave it up to you, the viewer. But this is pretty much the hard Trick Room core. You know, I could even just go for like Terra Grass over here just so that I don't get slept by Amoonguss. Annihilate, I'll just keep that as it is. Armarouge, you know, you can go also Terra Grass here. You know, again, for the same reason, you don't get slept by Amoonguss. Torkoal, Terra Fire, extra damage. Indeedee, Terra Fairy, we said that. And then Hatterene, Terra Fire, right? So this is like a pretty standard, easy way to use a hard Trick Room core, right? Something like this. And again, if you want like an EV spreads for all these Pokemon, I'm going to save that for the team building coaching session, right? So if you are interested in, again, sitting down with me and building a team for Series 2, we've done it throughout. We did it for Orlando region. Some people did very well. They got positive records. So that's all I could really ask for. So that's really, really nice. So our stuff works. So if you're interested in that, check the video description. There's a link to the tier 3 sub if you want to do some team building with me, or check the comment section. I'll put the link there as well. Or every video has a join button. If you click join, you should be able to join with tier 3. And then again, you know, just book a session with me. You know, just message me on Discord saying you signed up, and then we'll schedule your session, right? So this is the hard Trick Room core. Now what I want to also do is show you the softer Trick Room core where we're not completely reliant on Trick Room, right? So let's take a look at what that setup looks like. Okay, so with a softer Trick Room core, what I'm going to do is this. So first of all, Hatterene, Indeedee, Torkoal, Armarouge, they're going to stay the same. But what's going to be different is the Annihilate set, and the addition of Roaring Moon instead of the Iron Hands. Okay, so the idea here is with Roaring Moon, we're going to go for Dragon Dance, okay? Because you already have the Indeedee for redirection support. So remember back in Sword and Shield, you used to do like Indeedee Dragapult, where Indeedee would click follow me, Dragapult would go for Dragon Dance, and then it would just Dynamax and Smash. So more or less the same idea here with the Roaring Moon. So what we're going to do is, again, go for Throat Chop, okay? Then go for Acrobatics, Dragon Dance, and then Protect, right? Very standard set. And then Booster Energy over here. Probably going to go Adamant, of course, just for a little bit more extra damage, because we're getting the speed anyway from Dragon Dance. Oh, that's Dragon Breath. There you go, Dragon Dance. Okay, and then from here, the Annihilate set, we're not going to go with the Choice Scarf Final Gambit stuff. This will be the other way. We're going to go with the Bulk Up set with Drain Punch, Rage Fist, of course, then Bulk Up, and then Protect, right? And I think this is a little bit more consistent on this kind of team. You can even do like Follow Me, you know, Bulk Up sets, or then, you know, even set up Trick Room potentially for any of these Pokemon. But ideally, again, you also have the special attacking mode with Hatterene / Armarouge. Then the physical mons can just come in the back and do their job, right? Especially with like setup with Bulk Up and Dragon Dance. I think it's very helpful with something like this. And from here, you know, you can just adjust your Roaring Moon Terra type. You can just go with Terra Flying, of course. The Annihilate, you can go keep it as Fighting, you know, for Drain Plus stuff, or you can go for Rage Fist, change to Terra Ghost, or you can go with Terra Fire. So this way you don't get burned, okay? But you also have the armors for that, so maybe you don't even consider Terra Fire. You probably just go Terra Ghost, for example, you know, just for extra Rage Fist damage. It's up to you. There's a lot of options you can do here, but you know, it's very flexible. But these guys, they pretty much stay the same, right? So this is a softer Trick Room core where you're able to build something like this with a different Annihilate set. and just add Roaring Moon here with Dragon Dance setup. This is something that I would also consider, and in fact I like this a little bit more than this one. But I'm down to build both. So if you want to consider building both of these or just one of these, definitely again consider joining with tier 3, and we can even adjust them a little bit as the meta progresses. But yeah, that's all I wanted from now for this video. I just wanted to really spotlight Hatterene. I felt like it was overshadowed in the tournament just because in Top Cut it didn't quite make it, and there was like pretty much Gothitelle, Parastrap everywhere. But if you look behind the scenes a little bit more, if you looked a little bit deeper, you know, besides the Top Cut, you would notice some other trends that just almost made it, but not quite, but still very, very strong, right? And I felt like Hatterene was one of those Pokemon because we had it as a sleeper, and it still did well, right? Because 8-2, 7-3 records are still very, very good in a regional, of course. So yeah, that's why I wanted to do this video today. So if this is something that you want to do for Series 2, go for it. I think Hatterene is actually kind of nice right now. All right, but yeah, that's gonna be it for now. We'll be back with another video in the next one, guys. Peace out and have a good night.